To serve and for burdens is the title of today's Bible study, taken from Numbers chapter 4, verses 21 to 33. And the thought for our meditation, appointed to bear the burdens, appointed to bear the burdens. Matthew Henry, he observed, he says, we have here the charge of the other two families of the Levites, which, though not so honorable as the first, yet was necessary and was to be done regularly. The Gershonites, who are they? Well, we saw earlier how there were 7,500 of them, of whom 2,630 were old enough to serve. We saw this in the last chapter when we, in chapter 3, verse 21 to 26. Of Gershom was the family of the Libnites, and the family of Shemites. These are the families of the Gershonites, those that were numbered of them according to the number of all the males from a month old and upward. Even those that are numbered of them were 7,500. The families of the Gershonites shall pitch behind the tabernacle westward, and the chief of the house of the father of the Gershonite shall be Eleazar, the son of Lael. And the charge of the sons of Gershom in the tabernacle of the congregation shall be the tabernacle, and the tents, the covering thereof, and the hangings for the doors of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the hangings of the court, and the curtains for the door of the court which is by the tabernacle, and by the altar round about, and the courts of it, for all the service thereof. And verse 38 of Numbers chapter 3 says, but those that encamp before the tabernacle toward the east, even before the tabernacle of the congregation eastward, shall be Moses and Aaron and his sons to keep the charge of the tabernacle, for the charge of the children of Israel, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. All that were numbered of the Levites, which Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord, through their families, all the males from a month old were 22,000. And the Lord said to Moses, number all the firstborn of all the males of the children of Israel, from a month old and upward, and take the number of their names, and thou shalt take the Levites for me. I am the Lord, instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and of the cattle of the Levites, instead of all the firstlings among the cattle of the children of Israel. So you see that they were among the group of the Levites, 22,000 of them, the Gershonites, 7,500, of which 2,630 were of the age to bear the great burdens that were placed upon them. As we saw in Numbers chapter 3, verse 21 to 26, they were camped at the west side of the tabernacle. Right? You see this in your diagram, right at the end of the notes. The Gershonites, they are camped on the west end of the tabernacle, and they had Eleazar as their leader. What is their responsibility? Well, it was to transport the coverings, hangings, and the framework of the tabernacle and all the equipment that pertained to them. For this work, they were given 2 carts and 4 oxen. Ithamar, the priest, would supervise them. So you would notice that this is what we call the logistics. How important it is that this aspect would be very smooth, and God appointed the Gershonites for this. Then we also would see in this chapter the Merarites, from verses 29 to 33, they were also appointed. There were 6,200 of them, of whom 3,200 were of the proper age to serve Right? We see this in verse 43 of chapter 3. And they were to camp on the north of the tabernacle. And they had Zoriel as their leader. And they had an especially difficult task because they carried the heavy boards of the tabernacle, as well as the bars and the pillars and the silver sockets into which the pillars fit. No wonder Moses gave them 4 wagons and 8 oxen to help them with their work. This you see in Numbers chapter 7 and verse 8. And 4 wagons and 8 oxen he gave unto the sons of Merari, according to their service, under the hand of Ithamar, the son of Aaron, the priest. And Ithamar supervised their work. Worsby, Warren Worsby, he said, well, he says, he observed and he says, all this information about the ministry of the Levites reminds us that God is concerned with the details and wants his work to be done by the people he has chosen and in a way that he has appointed. Nothing in the camp of Israel was left to chance or human contrivance. Each Levite and priest knew his responsibilities and was expected to serve God with reverence and godly fear. Caring for the tabernacle was serious work, a matter of life and death. So you would notice here how important it is that in the organization of God's people, that there is indeed defined, clear roles for each. What will they do? How can they contribute? And there were some who will bear greater burdens, others who will share the burden with others, but all are appointed to a work for the Lord's sake. And the chapters also reminded us that not everybody has the same burdens as we saw. So the Gershonites and the Merarites put their burdens on wagons, but the Kohathites, they had to carry their burdens on their shoulders. And so you realize how the Apostle Paul gave this law for his people, that we are to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6 verse 2. There are those things that we can do to help others, and one of those things that we can do is to pray and intercede for the people around us, those who are not well in the body, those who are sick, those whose loved ones who are still outside God's kingdom. There are many important work that the people of God can do. And as they are assembled for prayer, whether they are praying individually in their homes, in their closet, or whether they would be gathered like what we will do tonight in our Wednesday night prayer meeting, we bear one another's burdens, and we also pray for ourselves, pray for our own well-being, right? And our burdens. Galatians 6 verse 5, Paul says, for every man shall bear his own burdens. God appointed us certain responsibilities that we are to undertake to do. And so you realize that in the nation that God organized, there is great allocation of task and work for each one. So Wellesby observed, he says, the church indeed is an organism, a living spiritual organism. It is also an organization, yet an organism not organized, it will die. Right? There are those who challenge and said that, a church is not an organization. A church is a living organism. But a church is also for it to function and work effectively as a witness for God, it has to be organized. And so if you look at what God is doing with the nation of Israel, you notice that He's organizing and giving every detail for every work that He has appointed His people to do. So we begin the book by highlighting, naming the standing army from all the tribes of Israel except the Levites, how they would be organized into an army. And verse B said, well, he says, if an army isn't organized, it can't fight the enemy successfully. If a family isn't organized, it would experience nothing but chaos and confusion. Isn't it so true? Right? That every family has to be organized, that somebody has to do the grocery, somebody has to clean the floor, somebody has to wash the toilet, right? Somebody has to cook, somebody has to ensure that the various aspects of the household is taken care of. And so, if we observe the nation of Israel, the way it is organized, verse B said, well, he says, God was preparing His people to engage enemy nations and defeat them. It was important that the camp be orderly and the work of the tabernacle organized. Otherwise, worship would not please God and warfare would lead to defeat. Well, that was how God organized the nation. But look at Israel later on in the book of Judges, he observed. He says that in that time, what happened to the laws that God, good laws that God has given them? Somehow they were all thrown away. They have lost their cohesion, right? The leadership to organize and to bring themselves together. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Judges 17 verse 6. In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Well, Israel was organized as a theocracy. God leads them, and God gave His laws by which the people of God are to be organized according to His good word. And God leads them in that way. Do they not know? Can they not understand the invisible God who has given them His laws? Expect that they would follow the blueprint of His word, right? To be an effective nation, to be an effective people for the witness, for their witness to the world. Judges 18 verse 1, in those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in, and for unto that day all the inheritance had fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. Judges 19 verse 1. And it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Ephraim, who took him a concubine out of the Bethlehem, Judah. Here we see how there was great chaos in the land. Men did what was right in their own sight. Judges 21 verse 25. In those days there were no kings in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own sight. So as you make a comparison to what Israel was when they came out of Egypt and God organized them, the building of the tabernacle and the organizing of the Levites to the various tasks for the worship of God, you notice that God was with them, and God's blessing was with them. There was great cohesion, just like the infant church, the early church, that when God organized them at Pentecost, right, how the people simply love one another, serve one another, bear one another's burdens, and there was gladness. Right? There was gladness, and they had all things common. The Gershonites were charged with the drapery of the tabernacle, the curtains, the hangings, and the coverings of the badger's skin. So they were given a task. This was the work that they were supposed to do, heavy work, we may say. Right? They would bear the curtains of the tabernacle. They would bear his covering, the covering of the badger's skins, the hangings on the door of the tabernacle, the hangings on the courts, hangings on the door, for the door of the court, gate of the court, by the tabernacle and by the altar, the courts and all the instruments and all that is made for them, so shall they serve. What were they to do? Well, this were to be taken down when the cloud is removed, and the ark and the rest of the holy things were carried away, to pack up and bring with them, and then to set up again where the cloud rested. Aaron and his sons allotted to them their respective charge. And here you would see God give the appointment, the assignment. You shall take care of such a curtain, and you of such a hanging, and everyone may know his work, and there may be no confusion. And Ithamar, Aaron's son, was given the charge as the oversight over this group. And the Merarites, who are the Merarites? Now we're going to look at the Merarites. They were charged with the heavy carriage, the boards and the bars, and the pillars and the sockets and the pins and the cords, and these were delivered to them by name. So an inventory was given of them, of every particular that it might be forthcoming, and nothing to seek when the tabernacle was to be set up again. So it was well organized. Everyone knew what they were supposed to do, and everyone understood their task. And so it was well organized under God. You see, when we are under God and we are organized under God's law, God's way, you see that there is great blessing. Though these seem of less importance than the other things pertaining to the sanctuary, yet there was this care taken of them to teach us with the greatest exactness to preserve pure and entire all divine institutions, and to take care that nothing be lost. It also intimates the care God takes of his church, and every member of it, the Good Shepherd calls his own by name. Isn't it so true? Right? To name to him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and he leadeth them out. John 10 verse 3. And so here you see the organization of thousands of people, thousands of men employed to these services, and you would notice that there's no confusion. Right? All is well taken, well done. And they all knew what they were supposed to do, and their lives were dedicated for this purpose. But you would notice that as time went on, the people of God lose that focus on God and the work that God has assigned for them to do. In the book of Haggai, it is described how things has gone so bad instead of doing the work of God in the building the tabernacle, they were building their own houses. They were busy building their own houses. Is it time for you? Haggai, the old prophet, came and spoke to the returnees after 70 years of captivity. Right? They came back. God was to organize them to serve Him again. And how were they organized to serve Him again? They were to build the tabernacle, to build the temple again, rebuild the temple that was destroyed by the Babylonians. So the second temple, Joshua and Zerubbabel, the high priest, will be tasked to lead the people to rebuild the second temple. But at that time, you would notice that the people were not interested. Chapter 1, verse 9 of the book of Haggai. Ye looked for much, and lo, it came to little. When ye brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because of my house that is waste, and ye run every man unto his own house. So if you will not realize that the life of His people is organized around His worship and His work, then you realize that we run off doing our own things, and it's going to be very, very sad and sorry. Right? On Sunday, we were studying the life of Abraham and Lot, right? How Lot went into Sodom, right? And he wanted to make gain. He lost track of God's purpose, and he suffered greatly. This Lord's Day, we will see how God will send fire and brimstone to destroy all his gains in Sodom. Right? So much so that at the end, he gained nothing. As Haggai says, ye looked for much, and lo, it came to little. When ye brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because of my house that is waste, and ye run every man into his own house. As we think about the work that is done, you notice that the men who were appointed to do, they would spend their life carrying these burdens. The larger part of their useful life, from 30 to 50 years old, they would devote to the service of their God, to their Lord, and soon they would their life would be taken from them. But is it a good life? After you have served God, you have done your work? Yes, of course. A most wonderful a testimony, right, of a work done, a life well lived, to the glory and honor of God. And such a life is indeed worthy, right, of our learning, worthy of our emulation, worthy of our understanding. Paul says how he had completed his life task on earth, 2 Timothy 4:18. And the Lord shall deliver me from every evil work, and will preserve me unto his heavenly kingdom, to whom be glory forever and ever. So as you serve God, God will be with you. You will be delivered. God will bless your work. Peter says, knowing that shortly I put off this tabernacle, even as our Lord Jesus Christ hath showed me. We'll notice and see that this body of ours is given by God for His purpose, and He has a task, He has a work for us to do, to serve Him, right, to worship Him, right, to be assembled before Him. And we thank the Lord that we can be assembled, right, here every Wednesday, on Sunday for worship, Wednesday night for prayer meeting. We thank God that His people can be gathered together, and God sends them out to do His bidding through all the various days for His own honor and glory. To serve and for burdens. What are the burdens that God has given you to carry? May you find His grace to serve faithfully and serve Him well with the time that God has allotted you. And we look forward to the day when we would meet our Lord, when our labors are over. May God bless our days for His honor, for His glory. Amen.